Nagumo is a useless weakling who gets betrayed by his friends and left to die. However, after eating monsters and teaming up with his vampire girlfriend, he becomes overpowered and defeats any enemy that stands in his way. But this all begins when Nagumo wakes up alone, deep in the Orcus labyrinth. As he makes his way through, he stumbles on the Easter Bunny, who wants to eat his carrot. But before the Easter Bunny can take a bite, Bigfoot shows up and decides he'll have the rabbit for dinner. As Nagumo realizes he's next, he tries to escape. But Bigfoot notices how juicy his meat looks and launches an attack that cuts off his arm. After this, he goes after the rest of his dinner, but Nagumo uses his only skill, transmute, to escape, creating a wall of rocks between them. Having lost energy from the blood loss, he passes out, and when he wakes up, he sees a holy crystal and remembers reading about its healing properties in a book. A week earlier, Nagumo and his classmates had prepared to enter the Great Orcus Labyrinth, led by Captain Meld. When they reached the 20th floor, Amanagala, the leader of the class, rescued him, telling him there was no point in his miserable existence. After the group spotted a beautiful glance crystal, a classmate touched it and triggered a trap that transported the class to the 65th floor, which was full of monsters. As the class tried to escape, he used his transmute skill to create a wall of rocks to slow the monsters down, allowing the others to get to safety. At this moment, Captain Meld organized the class to launch an attack on the monsters, creating cover for Nagumo to escape. However, one of the magic blasts targeted him instead, blasting him right in front of the behemoth, while the floor collapsed and plunged him and the monsters below. After seeing this, Kaori was devastated and remembered how only 9 days ago, she had pleaded with him not to follow them into the labyrinth, fearing he'd get his weak ass ended. However, unable to kick the main character out of the anime, she promised to protect him instead. In the present, Nagumo makes up his mind to survive and end any enemy that stands in his way, so uses his craving for meat as motivation to finally become useful, and lures a couple of demon foxes into a hole, trapping them with transmute. After sucking on their meat, he goes through a painful transformation as his hair turns white and muscles grow big. But when the pain stops, he notices his new appearance and decides to check his stats. Then he discovers his level has increased, granting him mana manipulation, mineral appraisal, iron stomach, and lightning field as new abilities. Using his mineral appraisal and mana manipulation skills, he creates a badass weapon and combines it with his lightning field to take out the Easter Bunny and eat its meat, gaining quick step, the ability to transport quickly, and aerodynamics, the ability to push off the air. Confident in his new power, he hunts down Bigfoot, hoping to eat his meat this time, but it launches an attack that he avoids easily with quick step. Then he jumps up in the air and fires his gun, but is knocked down by one of its attacks. However, he quickly launches a stun grenade, allowing him to shoot off its arm and eat it. After seeing this, it charges at him, but he takes it out with lightning field, delivering the finishing blow with a bullet to the head. After this, he decides to survive the labyrinth and go home. As he continues to eat Bigfoot, he learns that eating the same monster does not increase his stats, but he gains Spirit Claw as a new ability. Then he makes his way through the labyrinth, unaware that he's starting from the first floor, but when he gets to the second floor, he faces another monster with petrification abilities, and defeats it with his stun grenade and gun. Outside the labyrinth, the class reports to the king about their encounter with the behemoth on the 65th floor, informing him of Nagumo's loss, but the king instructs the class to keep this information to themselves. Later, Shizuku watches over Kaori, remembering how she prevented her from going to Nagumo's aid and allowed her to get knocked out by Captain Meld. Then she was outside to train and remembers how they all got into this mess. In a flashback of when they arrived at Tortoise, the Pope had told the class of a century-long war that had raged on between the humans and the demons, but the demons had taken advantage of the beastmen, giving them the upper hand in the war. Desperate for help, the god of Tortoise summoned their class, asking them to help defeat the demons, and the classmates all agreed to help the people of the kingdom despite their teacher, Aiko's objections. In the present, Shizuku suspects something is wrong as she hears Hiyama sneaking around behind her. She invites him to train with her, but he declines while acting shady. After he leaves, Shizuku realizes Hiyama always had beef with Nagumo and wonders if he might be responsible for the incident. However, she convinces herself that it can't be true and heads inside as Kaori wakes up. There she informs Kaori that she's been asleep for 5 days, and when Kaori asks where Nagumo is, she realizes the group never went back for him. Meanwhile, in the labyrinth, Nagumo continues to survive and goes down 50 levels till he reaches a large sealed door. Unable to figure out how to open it, he tries to use transmute, which triggers the two Cyclops to awaken. But before they can fully wake up, he takes out one of them, leaving only one to deal with. Even though the monster uses defensive magic, he continues to shoot at it, backing it into a corner until he breaks through and defeats it. Meanwhile, in the kingdom, Kaori swears to become stronger so she can find Nagumo, asking Shizuku to help her on the way. In the labyrinth, Nagumo searches within the monsters and finds mana stones that serve as keys to open the door. And when the doors open, he sees a dark room with a strange magical design and a giant diamond at the end of it. He notices a girl trapped within the diamond and turns back immediately, knowing something is sus about this picture. But as he tries to leave, she tells him she was sealed down there because she had been betrayed. However, he tells her he wasn't born yesterday and that she needs to give him the tea. She then explains that she comes from a royal line of powerful vampires who locked her away for being an overpowered character, so he releases her and asks for her name. When she says she wants him to name her, he immediately turns on the Riz and names her Yue, which means moon. This makes her happy and she tries to give him some, but is suddenly interrupted when he gets stabbed in the back. He quickly uses his holy water as she helps him remove the spikes, and they turn around to see Mr. Krabs blocking the entrance. Nagumo then gives Yue something to suck on while he battles the monster, but is unable to penetrate its hard shell. So after seeing him struggle, she decides to help and sucks on him instead, giving her the energy to cast Azure Blaze. However, after just one hit, she feels exhausted, but he encourages her to give it to the monster one more time, showing her the spot to hit. Then they work together to hit the monster, finally getting it to squirt. Later, as he cooks himself some crab, he tells her that the vampires were destroyed 300 years ago and wonders how an old hag can be a lolly. He then asks if she knows about the labyrinth, and she tells him that they were built by mavericks, who use them to escape the gods, saying they may be able to escape if they find the mavericks' lair. Happy to hear this, he shows her his tool that got harder after using the crab's skin, but after seeing how big it is, she asks him if he's even human. While they go through the labyrinth together, he tells her how his classmates betrayed him for being a weak loser, and she cries for him. But he says that he's over it and only wants to go home, inviting her to come too. Meanwhile, Captain Mel tells Amanagal that he's grown stronger and encourages the team to continue training. Back in the labyrinth, Nagumo and Yui accidentally stumble into a Jurassic Park movie and figure that a monster must be controlling the dinosaurs with the flowers on their heads. As he searches for the monster behind the attack, she continues to suck on his neck, but he tells her he'd prefer if she sucked something else, so the two run into a cave alone. As they look around, he notices some green balls coming toward them and tries to block them with a wall, but she suddenly starts attacking him as a flower grows on her head. Suddenly, an ugly monster emerges and continues to force Yui to attack Nagumo until she finally lands a hit, causing a flower to grow on his head too. However, having built resistance from eating monsters, he's able to resist the mind control and shoots the flower off her head, freeing her and ending the monster. After this, he eats the monster's meat, asking Yui if she would like a bite, but she says she prefers to suck on him instead and takes off her clothes to get to work. Later, they continue to descend the labyrinth while resting and mapping out the area until they reach the 100th level and find another huge door. After entering through the doors, they find a giant room filled with glowing crystals and believe they've found the Maverick's lair, but a colorful Hydra emerges to stop them from advancing. The Hydra sends a fire blast at them and separates them, then fires an ice attack at Nagumo, which he evades, countering with shots from his gun, as Yui casts a glacial sheet to help. However, the white head heals the rest of the body, and they figure that the different colors have different abilities, so she tries to take it out with a crimson javelin, but the yellow head blocks the attack. Suddenly, the black head sends her into a trance and tries to attack, but Nagumo gets to her in time and jumps out of the way, leaving behind a stun grenade to slow the Hydra down. Meanwhile, he wakes her up, and she's glad to see that he hasn't abandoned her and touches him, which turns him on, causing him to kiss her. As he struggles to keep it in his pants, he tells her they have to defeat the Hydra before they can get to second base, so she casts a combo attack on the Hydra, which tries to get her to fall into a trance again. But she's able to resist by thinking about how Nagumo's gonna wreck her after this. Then he launches his weapon and sends a huge blast to the Hydra, while she follows up with Heavenly Blaze, finally destroying the Hydra. Nagumo turns and sees Yui exhausted from using too much magic, but suddenly a bigger head rises behind him and blasts him as he takes the hit to protect her. She runs to his side as he collapses from the blast and drags him away as the monster continues to rain powerful attacks at them. When she finally finds cover, she gives him holy water, but he doesn't wake up, so she charges out with his gun to finish off the monster by herself, but gets hit by one of its attacks. As it is about to finish her off, he comes to her rescue, moving much faster than before, and tells her to suck him to get more energy. Then he faces the monster alone, evading its attacks and planting grenades above it, causing the ceiling to come crashing down on it, and using transmute to hold it down. Then she casts Azure Blaze, which finally defeats the monster but falls from exhaustion and rests with Nagumo. Meanwhile, the Pope talks to Aiko, who nags him about forcing the students to fight after losing a classmate, and threatens to stop helping on the farms. So he agrees not to force anyone who doesn't wish to fight, and she storms off. Back in the labyrinth, the students return to the 60th floor for the first time since losing Nagumo, and after encouraging Kaori, they decide to advance. The next day, Nagumo wakes up in bed with Yui, and when he asks how they got there, she tells him that she carried him inside the Maverick's lair, healed him with more holy water, and slept with him. Then they get dressed and explore the rest of the lair until they reach a room where they find the corpse of the Maverick. Then he steps on a magic circle that triggers a recording of the Maverick, Orcus. Orcus congratulates him on reaching the room and tells him why he chose to fight against the gods of their world. Meanwhile, the rest of the class makes it to the 65th floor, and Amanagawa and Shizuku begin to flirt while Captain Meld tells them to get a room. After reaching a familiar spot, they once again trigger the behemoth, and he tells them to create an escape route. But this time, the students are ready, and they charge at the monsters. Amanagawa strikes first with his heavenly flash, while he gives everyone orders on how to proceed. Then Hercules uses his strength to hold the bull in place so that Captain Meld can penetrate it with his sword, but he's unable to cut through. However, Shizuku sees how weak his thrust is and decides to show him how it's done, slicing off the bull's horn with one strike. Meanwhile, as Kaori supports the students with her halo magic, Amanagawa thrusts his tool into the bull and gets kicked away, but she casts a spell to protect him. And then all the students work together and defeat all the monsters. Back at the lair, Orcus informs Nagumo that he will give him his powers, but requests that he doesn't use it for evil. Nagumo suddenly feels information rushing into his head and realizes the Mavericks were actually liberators, but couldn't care less as he just wants to go home. Then he tells Yui that he's learned creation magic and can now make artifacts, so they bury the corpse and head to the workshop, where they discover that the magic circle connects to the surface, using Orcus' ring. They'd also discover a book that says that conquering other labyrinths will grant them more ancient magic, which could teach them how to return home, so they decide to stay in the lair and learn as much as they can. Later, Nagumo relaxes in the bath alone, but Yui joins him, telling him that he officially has an all-access pass to her melons and gives them to him. Within the following 2 months, he manages to practice creation magic, build a prosthetic arm, cover up his missing eye, put a ring on her finger, and is finally ready to go to the surface. Before they go, he tells her he's likely to be targeted because of his power, but they vow to protect each other and surpass the entire world. On the surface, an ugly rabbit girl gets attacked by a monster as she waits for them to rescue her. Then, Nagumo and Yui appear and are about to further the plot when the rabbit girl rushes to them, asking for their help. Furious that she cock-blocked him, he refuses to help. Then the monster returns, and he shoots it for having the nerve to roar at him. Amazed by his strength, the worthless rabbit introduces herself as Shia, begging him to save her family, so he finally agrees to hear her out, but smacks her hard for wiping her tears on him. She tells him that beautiful girls don't like it rough, but he tells her that she doesn't hold a candle to Yui. However, she says her melons are way bigger than Yui's and offer him some, but he turns away, so he doesn't anger the missus, who's about to send her to an early grave. After Shia manages to survive, she tells them she's been exiled from the Beastmen because she's the only one who can manipulate mana and even use magic to see possible futures. As he fails to see how this is his problem, he creates a power bike, getting ready to leave her in the dust, but Yui suggests that they help her so she can guide them to the Great Tree. So they head toward the rabbit men and help defeat the monsters, using Shia as bait to distract them. After they meet with the other beastmen and force them to accept her, Shia offers to join them on their journey, but they decline, saying her uselessness would slow them down. Then the whole worthless village begs him to help them become stronger, and he gets to work as Yue spars with Shia until she's able to land a hit. Later, Nagumo asks about Shia's progress, and Yue admits that she's freakishly strong, so she asks to accompany them. But when he asks her why she wants to, she says that she's in love with him. Before Yue can send Shia to meet her maker, the other rabbit men report that they've destroyed the nearby monsters that had the nerve to try and end them, completing their transformation into a bloodthirsty village. After this, the villagers take them to the Great Tree, where they find a stone with a similar design to Orcus' labyrinth. So they insert his ring, and a message appears saying the door will only open to those with 4 symbols, the power of regeneration and a beacon formed of bonds. Unable to open the door, they decide to clear the remaining 4 labyrinths and part ways with the villagers, but Shia sticks around, remembering her mother's prediction that she would meet others like her. Determined to follow them, she reminds Yue of their agreement, and she's forced to ask Nagumo to let her come. After the trio leaves the Sea of Trees, they head back into Ricin Gorge and use a map to try and find the entrance of the next labyrinth. But Shia finds it out of dumb luck. Then they stumble on a stone tablet that welcomes them to Milady's labyrinth, just as Shia falls behind a trapdoor. Once inside, Milady taunts them from the stone tablet, causing her to break it with her new hammer, but the voice continues, replacing Shia as the most annoying character. The group continues through the labyrinth as she uses her new weapon to smash through all the booby traps until they reach a familiar room and realize they've been going in circles. Back in the kingdom, Yuka tells her classmates, who refuse to go back into the labyrinth, that she's planning to follow Aiko on her expedition, feeling like she has to do something to help and not just sit around. Back inside Milady's labyrinth, the group finally gets to a large door that they suspect will lead them to Milady's lair, but they have to battle through an endless army of armored suits, shooting and smashing their way through, till Shia smashes the giant door open. Then they all jump into a room with floating boxes and come face to face with a giant armored suit that claims it's Milady. But Nagumo says that's Cap, because the real Milady is dead, according to Orcus. The armored giant insists that it's her and asks them what they intend to do with ancient magic. So he explains that he was forced into their stupid world and is looking for magic that can get him back to his own. After she refuses to reveal whether she has the magic he needs, the group attacks, hoping to take out her core. But they can't deal significant damage, so she counters by raining down millions of boxes on them. The girls hold on to him as he escapes, and he distracts her while Yue sneaks behind her and cuts through her armor, but she laughs at them, saying that her armor can regenerate. He remains focused and knocks the armor down as Yue uses Freeze Coffin to keep it down. Then he drills a pin into her armor, which Shia hammers, causing her suit to break apart. Proud of how far Shia has come, Yue asks her to bend over while she rubs her, but Milady interrupts, using the last of her power to warn them about the bad guys they'll have to face, telling Nagumo that he'll become the God Killer as she disappears. Then the group moves on to the next room, only to find another Milady body that gives them gravitic magic and her ring, but tells them only Yue is powerful enough to use it if she trains hard. Nagumo insists that she must have more artifacts to give them and shakes her till all her treasure falls out. But being the bastard she is, she flushes them away before they can gather any of it. On their way through, Shia sees a talking fish and passes out, so Nagumo rescues her and gives her C-Par to revive her. But she wakes up and tries to take it to third base, causing him to send her back to drown. Afterward, the trio heads to an inn, and he asks for a room for the 3 of them to share. However, Yue suggests that Shia stay in a separate room so she and Nagumo can get busy, but Shia protests, saying she wants him to develop the plot with her for the first time. The next day, the group meets with Ilwer, the head of an adventurers guild, who tells them he's been searching for them, hoping to get them to handle a mission, but Nagumo refuses to hear him out. Chang insists he hears his offer first and explains that the son of his friend, Count Kudeta, has gone missing with his party of adventurers and needs to be rescued, for which he's willing to pay handsomely. However, Nagumo still declines, so he offers to back the group if they ever get in trouble. After hearing this, Nagumo reconsiders and agrees to help if he makes them status plates and does anything they ask of him. Then the group heads out toward the mountains, but he plans to stop at Ur to get some rice. Meanwhile, at Ur, Aiko leads the farming team, including Yuka, and the remaining hero rejects, to set up the rice farms. Then they rest for the day and eat while Aiko worries about Shimizu, who has been missing for a week. The owner of the inn informs Aiko that this would be their last meal because of trouble on the mountain, but they'll be receiving guests who can help. After saying this, Nagumo, Yue, and Shia walk in and sit at a table, and Aiko recognizes him and runs to their table to confirm if it's really him. She asks him why he looks like an isekai's main character and hasn't returned to his classmates, but he gives her evasive answers, which angers Prince Charming standing nearby. He storms to their table, calling Nagumo rude and asking why he would allow a filthy beastman to sit with him. But Nagumo finally loses his shit when the moron threatens Yui, firing a warning shot at him. The loser students can't believe their eyes and wonder how he became such an asshole, as Yuka remembers the time he saved her life in the labyrinth. After he finishes his meal, he tells everyone that they should stay out of his way or he'll end them, and he leaves with the girls, but Aiko promises not to give up on him. Later, she gets a visit from him, and he tells her why he isn't going back with her. He tells her that in ancient times there were constant wars between humans, demons, and beastmen, which were fueled by their god. So a group of liberators rose to stop him, but the god turned the people against them, earning them the title Mavericks. Because of this, they built the labyrinths so that anyone who conquered them would gain the power to defeat the evil god. However, he says he has no intention of facing the evil god, and is only clearing the labyrinths to find a way home. But just before he leaves, he tells her that one of the students shot at him intentionally, and that she should warn Kaori and the rest to watch their backs. Later that night, he sets out with the girls but finds Aiko and the other losers blocking their way, insisting they come with them. After making a deal with her to leave once she gets the information she wants, he creates a car for them to ride in, and they head out together. On the way up the mountains, she tells him that Shimizu has been missing, and he reassures her that he's probably fine as she falls asleep on his arm. Once they reach the mountain, he releases his human locating drones to search the area, and they find some burnt remains of equipment that was left behind. So the group heads to the area, and they quickly find a giant crater and tracks left behind by a large creature. So they continue to climb up the mountain till they reach a waterfall, where they sense the presence of a human. Yui creates a way through, and they enter to find Will, who tells them he's the only survivor from a battle with the Black Dragon, feeling he's too ugly and useless to have been spared. Then Nagumo tells him to be happy he survived, and go on living in honor of the dead, while everyone wonders how he got so deep. On their way back, they hear a rumbling sound, and the Black Dragon suddenly appears and blasts them. But Nagumo forgets that this isn't the rise of a shield hero and blocks it with his shield. Then, Yui casts Heavenly Calamity, and Shia follows up with a hit from her hammer. But they're only able to stun the dragon as it begins to attack again, throwing Shia into the sea. While they attack, the dragon targets Will, offended by how ugly his face is, but Yui manages to protect him. Meanwhile, the other students try to help, but their attacks are too weak to hit. Nagumo tells Aiko to call back all the students and hide behind Yui, while he deals with the dragon alone and fires a gun that matches the power of the dragon and even overcomes it. When the dragon falls, he punches it in the gut and throws his stun grenades, but it fires a counterattack, which he evades, continuing to throw grenades at it. As it loses energy, he tosses it in the air while he summons a tool to hold it down. However, the tool is ineffective, as it breaks free, attempting to attack Will again, but Shiat comes to the rescue and delivers the finishing blow. After defeating the dragon, Nagumo sticks his tool up its rice cake, causing it to wake up and plead with him to stop, but he pushes it in deeper and asks if she's a dragonborn, which she confirms, saying she would explain everything once he removes his tool from inside her. However, he drives it in deeper with each stroke, telling her to start talking, so she explains that she was mind-controlled by a mysterious man who sent her to end Will and his friends, but he doesn't buy her story until Yui confirms that dragonborns are proud and honest, and she would not be lying. She then tells them to at least spare her life long enough for her to stop the man who controlled her, claiming that he's setting up an army of monsters, but Nagumo still plans to end her since she took innocent lives. Just before he drives his tool all the way in, Yui stops him and reminds him of his one rule. So he agrees to spare her and struggles to remove his tool as she makes happy noises and transforms into her human form. She then introduces herself as Tio and informs them that the army of monsters is heading toward her, which Nagumo confirms, reporting up to 60,000 monsters in sight. Then Will asks if he can take on the monsters, but he says his only job is to return Will safely and asks who will inform the town. Tiwa says her mana is too dry to move, so he drags her behind him, making her happy as she likes it rough and dirty.
Nice.
Back in town, Aiko pleads with Nagumo to help defeat the army of monsters, so he helps the people prepare and evacuate the town, but before he goes off, he he spots the mysterious man, and she tells him to return safely. While he waits for the monsters, Yuko approaches him to thank him for protecting her back in the labyrinth. But he claims it was a fluke and tells her not to die. As she leaves, Tio emerges and offers to join him on his journey, but he refuses, which only turns her on and makes her offer herself to him, promising to show him what she can do with her body in the upcoming battle. When the army is in sight, he turns to the townspeople and assures them that they cannot lose as Aiko, the goddess of plenty, is on their side and has summoned him to help defeat the monsters. The idiot townsfolk eat his words up, getting pumped for battle, even though they are about to be completely useless. Then he and she begin to fire their weapons at the army while Yui and Tio cast their spells to attack, wiping out several monsters at a go but barely putting a dent in their numbers. As the monsters continue to advance, Tio runs out of steam as her ring breaks apart and she falls asleep, while Nagumo also runs out of bullets and charges forward with Shia, hoping to find the man controlling the others and stop him. They head into their ranks and take them out one by one, ending anyone who stands in their way, till they finally find the masked man and confront him, shooting his wolf before he gets a chance to escape. Nagumo carries him back to town, where Aiko confirms that it's actually Shimizu, who wanted to show off how great he was by attacking. But Aiko concludes that this must be Boyd math and asks him to explain what he means. Then he reveals that he made a contract with the demons to end her for being the goddess of plenty, hoping to be praised by the demons in return. However, he didn't count on any character being open enough to wipe out an army of 60,000 monsters. As she tries to talk some sense into him, he suddenly grabs her, threatening to stab her with monster poison unless Nagumo gives him all his weapons, but he refuses. So Shia jumps forward to save her but suddenly gets hit by an attack from a faraway monster. As Nagumo rushes to give her holy water, she tells him to attend to his teacher first, who's in pretty rough shape, so he kisses her, giving her a lot to explain at the next PTA meeting. When she comes to, she rushes to Shimizu's side, who is dying from his wounds, and tells Nagumo to give him the medicine, as he swears that he'll be loyal to him. However, he ends him with 2 bullets, saying that he doesn't give second chances and leaves. On the way back, Will asks why he ended Shimizu, who was going to die anyway, and she explains that he took the burden of his death from Aiko, so she could continue to be a good teacher. The next day, a couple of slavers find a merfolk child and plan to auction her off. Meanwhile, Nagumo returns Will to Ilwar, who fulfills his promise and gives them status plates and lodges in a room with the girls, where he keeps watch, saying he'd end anyone who comes after them. At this, Tio remembers her father's dying words to her as a kid, that their enemy is the god of their world, and one day, a being will come along with enough power to stop him. In the present, Shia gets Nagumo to take her around town, and they enter an aquarium where he meets a talking fish that he prefers over Shia. It tells them that it was brought there against its will, so they set it free, and before it leaves, it tells them about the merfolk girl who was brought in with it. Then they head back into town, and he senses a weak presence coming from below. Meanwhile, at the market, Yui tells Tio that she's comfortable with a 3-way because Shia is submissive. At the same time, Nagumo and Shia find the merfolk child near the sewers and take her back to town, where she wakes up and introduces herself as Miu. After they clean up and feed her, she tells them that she got separated from her parents and taken by the slavers who want to auction her off. After this, he plans to leave her with the city guards, but she begs to stay with them and finds out he's an asshole as he gives her away despite her crying. As they leave, they hear an explosion and head back to find that she was taken by the slavers, who left a message for him to give up Shia to keep the kids safe. However, this only excites him, as he finally has someone to shoot. He finds Yui and Tio, explains the situation, and they split up to search for her, while taking out all the slaver gangs in the town and freeing other stolen children. Then he finds her at the auction house and frees her, taking her up to a good view as they destroy all the slavers' hideouts. After he introduces her to Yui and Tio, she decides to make him her papa. Later, the group heads back to Dorad, and they meet Kilu, who finds it hard to believe the report of their time into her. Suddenly, Endo, his former classmate, bursts into the room to report that a demon is in the labyrinth, but quickly recognizes Nagumo and asks for his help saving his classmates. Just before this, the classmates had finally reached the 90th floor when they came across a demon who told them to join her, but they refused. So she released invisible monsters on them who attacked Shizuku and Suzu, but Kaori quickly cast a healing spell that also revealed the monsters. After this, they rushed to attack, but got their asses handed to them as the demon healed the monsters instantly. So Shizuku told Endo to sneak out and report to Captain Meld that they needed help. Then the demon asked Amanagawa to join her once more, but he refused, finally defeating a monster. However, the demon cast a cloud of smoke to end them, so Suzu cast a barrier spell to protect them, but was stabbed by a monster that appeared within the barrier. As the barrier broke, the smoke cloud advanced and turned Suzu's legs to stone, but Amanagawa blasted it away before it could reach the others. Devastated by Suzu's loss, he drops to his knees, and when Shizuku tells him to get his bitch ass up, he asks how they could run when the demon ended their friend, so she slapped him as the answer. At the same time, Endo reached Captain Meld on the 70th floor and explained the situation, but they were attacked by a monster that followed him back, so the captain sent him to warn the others above about the demon, and this brings him to the present with Nagumo and his party. However, back in the labyrinth, the classmates manage to escape from the demon, but Hiyama suggests that they surrender, which Eri seconds, saying they'll die if they keep running. Suddenly, they see a bloody Captain Meld, who tells them to do whatever it takes to survive, as the demon appears and finishes him off. But this angers Amanagawa, who prepares to use his ultimate move again. He manages to cut through the monsters and deal the demon significant damage, but can't bring himself to end her. So she takes advantage of that and summons a monster to send him flying. On the surface, Endo begs Nagumo to save his classmates, and as he hesitates, he remembers his time with Kaori, Yuka, and Aiko and makes up his mind. Back in the labyrinth, Kaori runs out of mana as she tries to save the captain, and Shizuku does all she can to hold the monsters back, but is tossed aside like a rag doll. Kaori rushes to her side, protected by Suzu, who is somehow still alive, but the monsters break through the barrier, and they prepare for the worst when suddenly a large tool penetrates the monsters and ends them as Nagumo appears in a badass entrance. As the students are shocked to see him, the rest of his party appears, and he instructs them to protect his classmates and deal with the monsters while he faces the demon, giving her a chance to run away, but she tells him that he has walked into hell. After declaring her his enemy, he grabs one of the monsters from thin air, throws it across the room, and begins to shoot all the monsters she throws at him, as his classmates watch with their jaws on the floor. He jumps in the air and throws his grenades, followed by a shower of gunfire that ends the monsters instantly. Then a giant ninja turtle sends a powerful energy blast his way, but he uses his shield to reflect it at the demon, who realizes she's come face to face with the devil himself. As he continues on his bloodthirsty rampage, Amanagawa asks Endo who the badass is, and he reveals that it's actually Nagumo, causing Hiyama to piss himself as he remembers that he shot the rogue attack on him. As he struggles to believe it's really him, Yue tells him to shut the fuck up and let Nagumo cook. Suddenly, some monsters try to attack the students, but Yue casts Dark Firmament and sucks them into a dark ball, while Shia joins in on the action and clobbers the monsters to dust. Next, Tia wipes out her share of monsters, causing the demon to send Voldemort's snake after Shizuku and Kaori. But Nagumo tosses her a sword, which she uses to make sushi. The demon then casts her ultimate move, sending the dark cloud to him, and everyone thinks he's a goner. So Miu calls out for her papa, sending Kaori into a world of rage. However, he emerges unscathed and questions her on the source of her power, figuring out that someone else had gained ancient magic from a labyrinth and given it to her. As she accepts her fate, she warns him that her lover will come to avenge her, but he promises to send him to join her. Amanagawa pleads for him to spare her life, but he ends her without a second thought, causing Hiyama to shit himself this time. Afterward, Shia reports that she's been able to heal Captain Meld as Yui rushes to Nagumo's side to further the plot, but she tells him to read the room as the other classmates approach them. Kaori then thanks him for saving them and apologizes for breaking her promise as she embraces him, enraging Yui and Shia, who struggle to share him already. As they leave the labyrinth, Amanagawa questions him, saying he didn't have to murder the demon, but Nagumo tells him that he's not a weak peep like him and takes care of his business. He then explains that he only helped them because he owed Kaori one, causing Yui to give her the death stare. On the surface, Kaori tells him she loves him and wants to stay by his side, even if it's as a side piece. So Yui asks him to allow her so she can put her in her place, but Kaori takes the challenge, believing that she can win him from an old hag. Nagumo and the others leave, telling Kaori they'll be setting out the next day, but later that night, they all relax as Amanagawa tries to stop Kaori from going, but Shizuku tells him to sit his ass down and leave her. So the next day, Kaori says her goodbyes and joins Nagumo's growing harem as they ride off. Back in the kingdom, Ishtar tells the king about the hero's return and the recent activities with the demons, while Princess Lily looks worried. But not long after, a servant announces their arrival, so she rushes to welcome them and is overjoyed to see Shizuku and the other classmates. Lily informs her that the hero rejects have been training hard since the others went down into the labyrinth, but when she asks where Kaori is, Shizuku tells her she was won over by Nagumo's large guns in Doa-Riz, which is why Amanagawa has been sulking like a sore loser. After hearing about his tool, Lily wishes she could see it for herself, but Shizuku says he has enough baddies in his harem. At the same time, Nagumo and his crew ride through the desert, while Kaori and Yue argue about who he prefers, but Yue wins completely when she tells her about her Gok 3000 master skills. Suddenly, Tio points out giant sandworms up ahead, but notes that it's strange that they seem to be hesitating to attack their prey. However, one of the worms appears in front of them, and the horde begins to attack, so Kaori uses the distraction to practice her throat skills, but they tied her up so Nagumo can cook. Immediately, he brings out the sick weapons on his rod and fires multiple rounds, clearing the way as they see a man lying in the middle of the road. Kaori says she can't abandon him since she's a priest, so she checks to see what's wrong with him, and discovers he has mana overload, which is ending him from the inside. She casts a Santorum spell to suck out some of the excess mana, though she warns them it's only a temporary fix. Then the man wakes up, and after seeing Kaori, he thinks he's in heaven, but Nagumo steps on him and tells him to get his own bad bitch. Back in the truck, he introduces himself as Baz, son of the Duke of Ankaji, and tells them their people started collapsing from a strange fever, and a poison that causes mana overload is in their water. After hearing how fucked the town is, he agrees to lend them a hand in getting a cure from the Giran volcano. Meanwhile, in the kingdom of Garland, Freddy tells his subordinate, Michael, that their last mission failed miserably due to the presence of an irregular, who wiped out their entire army, so he plans to head to the volcano himself to acquire the power of a god, all in service to their king. After leaving Michael in charge, he heads off to find the irregulars and make them pay for disrupting their plans. When the group arrives at Ankechi, they meet with the Duke, who asks them for their help. So Shia and Kaori start to attend to the sick while the rest head outside, and Yue uses her Azure of Magic to immediately dig into the ground. Then Nagumo lines the bottom of the hole, and she uses her tidal wave magic to supply it with water, creating a lake they can use in the meantime. But when she feels exhausted from using so much magic, she turns to her snack and takes a bite, making sure to get some action in the process while Tayo and Maya watch. After, the townsfolk show them to the oasis, and when he thinks he sees something with his demonic eye, he asks the Duke if they use any artifacts at the bottom of the oasis, but he says all the artifacts they use are on the outside. So Nagumo steps forward and throws several grenades into the water, which causes large tentacles to emerge and try to attack, but he shoots them down, while Yue and Tio handle the others, revealing a jelly-like monster with a mana crystal inside it. He shoots at the crystal, which ends up destroying the monster, but when the men check to see if the water is back to normal, they see it's still polluted. Tio assures them that since the fresh water flows out constantly, it will eventually return to its original state. So the Duke asks what could possibly have been responsible for the monster living there. So Nagumo tells him it was probably the demons, which surprises the Duke, but he thanks them for their help. They head back to town, and the Duke tells the people not to give up, since they now have clean water at Nagumo, and his team have accepted the quest to mine stillstone from the Grand Grun volcano. Kaori offers to stay and look after the patients along with Miu, so he thanks her, but when Miu asks if he's going to give it to her like he did with Yue, this triggers Kaori, who turns into the FBI with all her questions. Afterward, they head through the desert and arrive at the volcano, but when they go up, the heat starts to get to everyone except Tio, who is used to enjoying pain. When they get inside, they see the stillstone has mostly been mined from those areas, so they decide they'd have to head deep inside to get the quantity they need. As they continue in, a fire blast heads toward them, but Yue uses her spatial severance magic to swallow it, and when they see the fiery bowl that's behind the attack, he asks it if it would like to taste his tool, but Shia says she'd handle it instead and gives it to it roughly with her large hammer. After, they discover a bright room lined with all the stillstone they'd need, so they decide to clear the labyrinth before mining it and leaving. As they head deeper still, the girls get so hot that Yue starts to sound dumber than Shia, and even Tia says they need to rest. So he uses his transmute skill to make a room, and Yue uses her ice magic to help them cool off. Tio suggests that if the Orcus Labyrinth was meant to train you to fight several monsters and gain experience, and the Ryzen Labyrinth tested the ability to respond to different types of attacks, then the Gruen Volcano might test how to respond to ambushes and surprise attacks. So he wonders if the tests are actually teachings from the Liberators. But he loses focus when he sees Tio's massive plots. However, he remains loyal to his flat queen. Later, they ride on a lava lake till they arrive at a dome with 100 gems lining the walls and wonder if they accidentally slipped past the Guardian. Suddenly, a fireball hurls toward them, so Tio counters with her fire blast. However, it begins to rain fireballs, and they split up to get to safety. Yue covers Nagumo as he heads toward the island, but a lava serpent suddenly emerges, and when he shoots it down, 3 more appear, causing him to retreat and regroup. He suspects they're similar to the monster back in Ankeji with mana crystals located somewhere inside them. But when his demon eye is unable to locate them, he brings out a powerful gun and takes one down fast enough to reveal the crystal and crush it. The girls join in, and they take out all the serpents, but when they respawn, Shia points out that the same number of snakes they defeated are now broken on the dome. So the team realizes they have to defeat all 100 snakes and get to work. Tio suggests that whoever takes out the most snakes gets a reward from Nagumo. But when Yue cooks, they know they stand no chance. After Nagumo takes out the last snake, a massive energy beam comes crashing down on him, leaving him badly injured, so Yue uses her magic to catch him and carry him to safety, where she gives him some holy water, though he remains unresponsive. Suddenly, Tio tells her to look out and casts a barrier spell to shield them from a mysterious attack. Then Yue casts a barrier spell to protect them as the attacks take out the surrounding area. Suddenly, Frigate appears with a horde of dragons and says the ambush was a success, though he wonders how he survived a direct hit from one of his dragons and asks how much ancient magic he's been able to learn. Nagumo manages to get up and asks who the fuck he thinks he is, so Frigate says he's God's apostle, who plans to bring divine punishment to him. But Nagumo declares him as his enemy and decides to show him his boss. However, all their attacks are repelled by a magic shield, and Freyad uses his magic cosmic rift to teleport behind him and send another powerful blast at him that he's barely able to guard against. As the girls defend against other attacks, Tio remembers her father's last words for her to show her true self when the right time comes, while Nagumo uses his limit break technique to break away from the attack and his cross shields to protect him, while he moves closer and closer to Freyad. Freyad tries to attack, but is knocked away by Tio in her true black dragon form, which he thought was all wiped out. The two dragons use their dragon breath on each other, resulting in an intense battle for who's stronger, and when Freyad tries to interfere, Nagumo finally reaches him and fires a gun that is able to penetrate through his shield, then launches forward to attack, sending him flying off the dragon. Tio is able to overwhelm the white dragon, but it flies back and rejoins Freyad, while Nagumo's technique runs out of time, returning him to his badly injured state and causing him to fall toward the lava, till Tio swoops in and saves him. Freyad gives him props for being able to hold his own even after being ambushed, and the sacrifice he's about to make is worth it to defeat someone this OP. Just as Nagumo asks what he's talking about, the lava begins to rise, and he tells them he destroyed the cornerstone that was keeping the volcano inactive. Nagumo then tells Tio to take his ring and escape through the roof, since she's the only one who can make it through all the obstacles, and sends word to Ankeji, assuring her that he will keep his promise to the town and beat Freyad one day. Tio flies up to escape, but she gets attacked by the dragon horde, so Yue uses her magic to suck some of the attacks away from her, while the rest of the pain she receives helps to boost her stats, allowing her to break free. Meanwhile, Princess Lily walks through the palace remembering how she tried to call out to her father, but he and his men looked like something was seriously wrong. Then she finds Shizuku training and interrupts to tell her that the castle officials and church have decided that Amanagawa needs to get much stronger to fight the demons, while Nagumo might be branded a heretic. In the forest, Hiyama laments over how Nagumo could possibly be alive when a familiar voice calls out to him, but he tells her there's no longer any reason to obey her since Nagumo is still alive. The mysterious lady continues to assure him that he can still get Kaori back from him, as long as they make a trade. Later, Tio arrives at the gates of Ankeji and transforms back to her human form, so Kaori runs up to attend to her and asks why she's the only one there. As Tio gets some rest, she brings Kaori up to speed on what happened, so they remain confident they'll see him again, and decide to take Miu to Erison to reunite with her mother. Some days later, Nagumo floats on a ship in the middle of nowhere, and Yue asks him how he's doing, so he says the poison from the burning light is almost gone, and she decides he's healthy enough to ride. As things get steamy, he remembers how they narrowly escaped from the lava and were saved when a large door opened up for them. There, they stood in a magic circle and received magic that controlled space, along with a message from Grun, hoping the future of mankind would be based on free will. Yue grabs the proof of conquest he left behind, but says they wouldn't be able to use spatial magic yet since it's hard to use. So Nagumo tells them he made a ship that can swim through lava. Yue uses her barrier magic to get them into it, and they manage to make it out. They get attacked by sea creatures, and when they run out of ammo, Yue uses her magic to destroy them, but this makes her weak, and she's unable to suck Nagumo since he's in rough shape, so Shia says she can serve as her snack in the meantime. Back in the present, Yue rests from that exhausting ride, and Shia joins them, so they all find food to eat while they wonder where the hell they washed up. Suddenly, some mermen emerge, and the man begins to question them, so Nagumo smacks him aside with a fish. Then, they suddenly see Miu falling from the sky with Tio and Kaori beside her, so he jumps up to catch her, and the group officially reunites. Afterward, they sail to Erison, and Miu finally gets reunited with her mother, Remia, but when she sees her legs been injured, she assures her that her papa would help her and turns to Nagumo, while the other mermen argue over who's her papa, and figure Remia must belong to the streets. They head inside and Kaori begins to heal her, but she says she'd need a few more days to do it properly, so Remia thanks them for all their help but asks why Miu calls him papa. He explains the story, and she tells them they're welcome to stay at her house while they're in town, especially for Miu's sake, even offering to make him Miu's real papa if he's down, but he tells her he doesn't do single moms. Back in the kingdom, Shizuku stumbles into Aiko, and they catch up on what's been going on, so Shizuku asks how she managed to recover from almost dying, but Aiko starts acting sus, and Shizuku suspects that Nagumo rizzed her up as well. Then Aiko confirms that Nagumo has been branded a heretic, despite her objections and his acts at She suspects something fishy might be going on and mentions that all the officials seemed off, so she tells Shizuku that she needs to speak to the whole class about something important Nagumo told her. Some days later, they leave Erison for the ruins of the Melusine Labyrinth, and Nagumo spends night and day searching for it. One day, Kaori tries to get some alone time with him as they enjoy a beautiful sunset, but Yue appears, not willing to let her man slip through her fingers, and the other girls join them. Later, he gets an idea and holds the proof of conquest from the previous labyrinth up, which fills it with moonlight and creates a beam of light that points the way. They head into the ship and follow the ray of light till a wall opens up and sucks them into it, causing them to lose their balance for a bit. But when the ship stabilizes, he notices a red and black magic power, so he launches his new weapons at it, and they appear to be effective, allowing them to continue till they reach another magic circle. There, he holds up the artifact, and it unlocks the gate into an area that finally isn't covered with water, so they get off the ship. They head inside and face a couple of monsters, which he says are all embarrassingly weak for labyrinth standards, but he eats those words when they come across a purple gooey monster that Shia's smash has no effect on. Yue sets up a barrier spell, and Tio tries her fire magic, but Yue points out that the jelly seems to melt magic, just as the jelly starts to take shape. Nagumo and Shia shoot at it, but their attacks have no effect on it. So Kaori takes over shield duty, and Yue and Tio join in to attack, but nothing works, and it continues to surround them. He notices a space in the ground, and makes it wider so they manage to escape underwater, but the current pulls them in separate directions, and when he has to choose between Yue and Kaori, he picks the one with the larger rack. Later, they arrive at a beach alone, and when she asks him why he chose her, he says Yue can take care of herself, unlike her weak ass, and since the missus okayed it, he chose to save her. This makes her jealous of how much he trusts her, but he tells her to suck it up and remember they're still inside a labyrinth. They continue to walk forward till they reach a creepy warship wreckage and suddenly find themselves in the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise. He figures the illusions can be stopped by attacks infused with magic, and they manage to stop the attacks but soon find themselves surrounded by the crew, who says they defeat them for their god E-hit. They jump up and try to figure out what to do, so she suggests that defeating all the ships might end the war, and he gets down to business. Afterward, she asks what the fuck that was about, and he says it was probably a recreation of a war that happened in the past, and the concept of the labyrinth might be to show the tragedy the crazed god can bring about. When she thinks about all the lives lost, she gets sick and apologizes for her reaction, but he says he's not bothered since he's been to hell and back but was able to make it through thanks to Yue. This makes her jealous again, so he reminds her that he loves Yue, and if that bothers her, then she shouldn't be around him. Meanwhile, in the kingdom, Aiko is on her way to meet with the students when a woman in a nun outfit stops her and tries to brainwash her into going to Divine Mountain. But when Aiko resists, she resorts to a gut punch and tells her she wouldn't end her, but needs her as a useful pawn, all while Lely overhears everything. Back in the labyrinth, Nagumo tells her she needs to decide why she followed him and it's a good idea to stay. Afterward, they head to another ship, and when they hop on board, another illusion begins and they see a party with humans, demons, and beastmen getting along when the king appears and makes a speech about the success of their peace treaty. However, he suddenly switches up and tells them they can never be on equal footing with humans. Then he leads an ambush in the name of their god, slaughtering all the guests while he goes inside, followed by a mysterious masked woman. The illusion ends and Kaori wonders why it ended before they did anything. So he suggests that the point might be to get them to look around. As they search inside the ship, he comments that the king's actions seem strange and he shouldn't have been able to gather that much respect if he was truly hiding such hatred for the other races. Suddenly, a strange mist appears, and he catches a string that triggers some booby traps which he destroys instantly. But Kaori gets blown away by a strong wind, leaving him in the middle of an ambush. After showing them why he's the main character, he turns back to look for Kaori, and when he finds her, he puts a gun to her head and shoots. She comes to and asks why he did that, but he tells her to cut the craps since he can tell Kaori's body has been taken over. Then she asks him how he can hurt someone he cares about, but he says the magic ammunition only hurts the thing possessing her and fires another shot. He tells her that if she stays, he'll continue to show her hell without letting her die, and when she sees the murderous aura around him, she finally gives up and disappears. He leans in close to make sure she's okay, and when she comes to, she plants one on him and tells him that she's decided to stay with him, even if she'll always be inferior to Yue, making her the ultimate simp. Afterward, they reach the end of the dungeon, and he says that was a piece of cake compared to the other labyrinths, but she reminds him that it would have been tough for the people of this world with strong fates to witness all of the god-caused chaos. The rest of the team shows up, and Tio teases him about his alone time with Kaori, making him smack her till her buns become steamy. Then the simp brags about the kiss she shared with him, telling Yue that she's not backing down, so she welcomes the challenge. They step into the magic circle and gain the power of restoration, along with the proof of conquest, but the water suddenly starts rising, so Yue uses spatial magic to transport them, but they end up surrounded by water again, as the jelly monster reappears and attacks. While Yue holds it off, Nagumo begins to create a new weapon to defeat it, but before he can finish, it tries to swallow them whole, making them think they are goners till a swarm of fish holds it back, and the fish Higached tells him he came to help. Thanks to the extra time, Nagumo finishes up and launches the missiles, which finally defeat the monster and cause a huge explosion. Back in the kingdom, the students discuss how strange it is that Aiko isn't back from Divine Mountain, and Shizuku notes that Lally isn't back either. Captain Meld shows up, and they air their concerns about Aiko and several other students who have gone missing, so he tells them they're also investigating the case. Meanwhile, at Divine Mountain, Aiko is held captive, while the nun says that she has become an inconvenience to her lord's game. Some days later in Arisen, Miu wakes Nagumo up and asks why he and Yue are always naked, and when Yue tells her she'll understand when she grows up. She points out Nagumo's special growth and asks whether that's why he understands, so he grabs her and tries to explain when the girls walk in just in time and tell them breakfast is ready. While they eat, Nagumo thinks about how they'll have to leave soon, but doesn't know how to break it to Miu. Then they head out for a fun day by the water, and the girls play tag with her, while he sits alone still trying to figure out what to do. During the game, Miu jumps in the water and uses a big splash to steal Shia's bikini top, leaving her plots exposed while Remia swims up to Nagumo and thanks him for trying to keep Miu happy, but tells him that he should do what she needs to do since Miu has grown so much and can handle it. He agrees and plans to tell her they're leaving the next day, so Remia says they'll make a feast that night. Then she moves between his legs and calls him darling, and like clockwork, Yuet appears, ready to cook a fish, and Kaori laments how she can't catch a break, while Miu asks him if he wants Shia's bikini top, which makes Shia think Nagumo put her up to it. So Yuet offers him hers, and the other girls follow suit, till he's covered in every boy's wet dream. Later, he finally breaks the news to Miu, who tells him that one day she'll find him, so he promises to come back for her once everything is over and show her where he grew up. That evening, the girls are surprised at his decision to take her to Japan with them, and he says that even if he isn't able to take her back before they go, he'll do whatever it takes to cross back until he's able to make it happen. The next morning, Miu hands them identical charms to send them off, and they all say their goodbyes and leave Arisen. Back in the kingdom, Lily runs around the alleyways remembering what she saw the other day and wondering who she can possibly trust. Meanwhile, a brainwashed army is addressed by a hidden woman saying the time has come, with Hiyama standing nearby, while Aiko demands to know what they plan to do to her students while she's locked up. But the nun lady walks off, so she places her hope in Nagumo. At the same time, Freyad says the demon lord has issued his decree, so he leads his forces forward to attack the humans of the north. Meanwhile, Captain Meld ponders over the void that seems to be taking over all the magic knights and soldiers. So Josie approaches him to give a report that 30% of their forces seem to be affected, but he wonders if it's really an attack or them just being unfocused. Meld tells him to be on guard so he doesn't get affected too, and comments that the king doesn't seem to be affected and is rather excited to deal with the demons, so he sends Josie off to gather anyone with knowledge of dark magic to investigate the void and deal with it. Later, as he sits in his office, he wonders why he hasn't been targeted, if this is really an attack on the palace, so he prepares letters for the Duke of Ankeji and Nagumo, should anything happen to him. Suddenly, he hears a knock, and Iyama says he has something important to tell him, so Mo lets him in and asks what's wrong, but he just sits there quietly till they hear another knock on the door, and it's Jose with another report. However, when he opens the door, Josie immediately tries to attack, clearly being taken over by the void, but Meld manages to evade his attacks. Then he notices Hiyama and starts to walk over to attack, but Meld jumps in front of him to hold Josie off and suddenly gets stabbed in the back by Hiyama. He uses a wind spell to blow them all across the room, but when he heads toward Hiyama, two more magic knights come to his aid and charge at him with Hiyama's help, but he takes them all out, showing Nagumo is not the only badass. Then he crosses swords with Jose, disappointed he got taken over, but knocks him flat on his ass. Hiyama's surprised to see Captain Meld has been useful this whole time, but the fallen soldiers rise up again, and he says even death can't stop them. As more knights come in and surround him, he decides to fuck this shit and jump out of the window, but he comes face to face with an angel, and when she stretches out her hand, everything goes white. Afterward, the mystery woman picks up the letters Meld left behind, then asks Hiyama where the angel chick went, so he tells her she left, saying they were half-baked, but she says it was all part of her plan, and this proves she has the blessing of God. The next day, as Nagumo drives through the area, he sees bandits surrounding some people within a barrier spell, but when the barrier starts to disintegrate, Kaori begs him to help them, so he steps on the gas and brings out his weapons to take them out. When they arrive, Kaori rushes to heal the injured while Nagumo continues to take out the bandits. Then Lily runs up to her, and she's happy to see her. As they catch up, Nagumo walks up to them, and Lily's glad she finally got to see his tool up close, but he doesn't even recognize who she is, so Kaori tells him she's the princess. Afterward, she rides in the van with them and tells them about the brainwashing at the palace and Aiko's kidnapping. That explains that she was hoping to find help and had boarded a caravan to go see Duke Senjin for help, but was happy to run into them. Nagumo says they first have to rescue Aiko and points out that Divine Mountain is also a labyrinth and wonders what kind of ancient magic he can get there. Meanwhile, in her cell, Aiko wonders who they're plotting against, and she figures it might be Nagumo, just as he appears outside her window and busts in. When he tells her he came to rescue her, she gets flustered. Then he leans in and grabs her, but when she reminds him they can't because she's his teacher, he tells her he was just trying to remove the chains and should get her mind out of the gutter. So she asks him how he knew where she was, and he tells her about what Lally saw, which shows her that he cared that much, so she thanks him for saving her back at Ur, but warns him to be careful now that he's been branded a heretic. Suddenly, he hears a sound and gets word that the demons are attacking, so he tells her to meet up with the Managoa and the rest, but a bright light suddenly appears, so he grabs her, and they see that the mountaintop has been completely disintegrated by the angel, who calls herself Noint and claims she's God's apostle. The rest of the gang heads toward Shizuku's room when the windows suddenly break apart, and Lily sees that the Great Barrier has been destroyed, leaving the kingdom vulnerable. Then Tio radios in and tells them that the demons have invaded the kingdom and the White Dragon's breath broke the barrier. So Yue suggests that they split up, with Koori and Lily going to find the students while she and Shia go and make Fredid pay for hurting Nagumo. So they leave and meet up with Tio at the bell tower and ask where the proud bastard is, but Nagumo radios in and tells Tio he needs her to take Aiko to safety immediately, so she flies off. Suddenly, Shia gets a premonition and warns Yue, while an attack suddenly appears and incinerates the bell tower. But they escape in time and Fred shows up with his forces. He sends another dragon blast their way, but Yue uses the same spatial magic to send it back at them, incinerating half his forces. Then she signals for him to bring it on. Because of this, he tells his forces they'd need to split up, with Michael facing Shia and him focusing on Yue, so they don't get to collaborate. So Michael attacks Shia, and they end up transported to a separate location, where he tells her that he intends to avenge his betrothed, who they defeated in the Orcus Labyrinth. But Shia tells him she doesn't really care, and no one should be fighting if they don't want to die. This angers him, so they rain down energy blasts at her, but she evades them easily and whacks them with her hammer. So he warns his forces not to attack in close range, which makes her summon Miley's wrecking ball and begins to knock them out. Then they pierce her with stone needles, and just as she begins to petrify, she uses her quasi-restoration magic to return to normal, then wraps around him with her chain and smashes him into the ground, ending the one-sided beating. Back on Yue's end, Fred attacks with his volley fire, but she absorbs them with her magic, then summons a lightning dragon, but that gets absorbed by another ninja turtle. So Fredid tells her that as long as he has turtle power, her magic will be nullified. However, Yue says bitch please and summons 5 lightning dragons, which incinerate the turtle along with half his forces. So Fred casts a magic spell that pretty much acts like an atomic bomb and wipes everything out except Yue. But when she's distracted, his dragon stabs her. However, she chuckles and goes into demon mode, using a revival reversal spell to restore the injuries Nagumo inflicted on him in the labyrinth, weakening him severely, so his men cover for him while he escapes with spatial magic. Then Shia joins her and asks if how things are going, but she tells her he got away. Meanwhile, Noint continues to attack Nagumo, who stays on the defensive since he's carrying Aiko, so she charges in with her sword, blocking his shots and swings at him, but he evades and attacks with his cross shields. Then she commends him for being able to defend herself with the dead weight and acknowledges him as too strong, but says that's why he's not fit to be a pawn for their god. Then she fires a magic blast at him, but he uses his tools to create a barrier that protects them, but soon starts to hear chanting from the church, which generates magic that weakens others. So Nagumo asks her why she's focusing on him instead of defeating the demons, who could destroy the kingdom, and when she says so be it, he points out that it is just using the humans as pawns, and he might even be the same god backing the demons, but she doesn't seem bothered by this. So he asks why they don't just send him to his world if he's in their way, but she says that it would prefer for him to die on his way to reaching his goals for his entertainment. She then sends another powerful attack which finally shatters the barrier, but Tio arrives just in time and blasts her away. Then he hands Aiko to her, and she carries her to safety. On the way, Tio tells her that she has to deal with the church and needs to drop her off, but Aiko offers to help, revealing that her magic is actually on par with the Manigawa's, and she'd like to help. Meanwhile, Noint continues to give Nagumo a hard time as he notices her magic power doesn't seem to be decreasing, while his limit break technique has a time limit. But he continues to attack with all he's got and draws her in for a close range attack, but only manages to put a few scratches on her, while he's badly injured and exhausted. However, he pulls out 2 spatial rings and uses them to transport his attacks at her, which finally break apart her swords. Then he holds her in place while he powers up his ultimate tool, which no one has been able to survive, and tries to force it into her, and though she tries to resist, he finally gets it in and defeats her. After, he hears an explosion and rushes to find out the cause, but when he gets there, he sees Tio and Aiko have accidentally blown up the entire church, ending everyone on site instantly. When Aiko realizes what she's done, she struggles to come to terms with it, and he comforts her, but Tio soon points out the presence of a glowing man who's trying to get their attention. They follow him, and he leads them to a magic circle. making Nagumo wonder if this is also a labyrinth. Then they get transported to another room, where they receive magic that can manipulate a person's soul, which he figures is the same kind my lady used to keep her soul in a golem. Then he walks forward and reads that the requirement to defeat the labyrinth was to defeat 2 other labyrinths, have absolutely no faith in the god, and defeat an effect powered by God. So he grabs the ring, and Aiko reminds him that they have to go help out since the capital is under attack. At the same time, Shizuku hears a strange noise and gets out of bed to check what it is. Then she sees some other students out of bed, and they wake everyone up to investigate. Suddenly, Nia runs up and informs them that the demons are invading, so Amanagawa suggests that they'd buy time for the people to evacuate. But Eri suggests that they meet up with the rest of the Magic Knights first, and Suzu and Shizuku agree. So Mia leads them to where the Magic Knights are gathered, but the students can tell that something's off. Then Jose addresses the Knights and brings out an orb to signal the beginning of the war. But when he activates it, it creates a blinding light that blinds the students while the Knights attack, leaving only Shizuku standing. The mystery woman appears and says she isn't surprised that she'd be left standing just as Nia runs up to her asking for help. But when she embraces her, Nia stabs her in the back, and the mystery woman turns out to be Eri. After the students are tied up, and Eri chains up Amanagawa and kisses him, that reveals that she's so down bad for him that this entire plot has been to get him to be hers. So Shizuku asks what she did to the others, and she tells them they're all dead, and she used a special type of necromancy to bind their souls to hers. They refuse to believe she'd do such a thing, so she uses a classmate to demonstrate and brings him back right in front of them. Suzu asks how she could do such a thing, but Eri thanks her for being stupid enough to help her get this far. Then she turns to Shizuku and tells her she intends to use her to take out Kaori. So she grabs a sword, and just before she can plunge into her, a barrier protects her and Eri gets knocked away while Kaori stands at the entrance casting her spells while Lily keeps up a barrier. A Magic Knight tries to attack from behind, but Hiyama shows up and takes him down. So Lily turns to him for help, but he knocks her out, stabs Kaori, and says he's finally got her. Kaori still manages to cast a spell that heals all the students and begins to heal herself too, but Hiyama thrusts the sword back into her, causing her light to go out. Now healed, Amanagawa breaks out of his restraints and goes to town with the Magic Knight, and the other students join in to help. But when he tries to attack Eri, Captain Meld stops him, and he's forced to fight him but suddenly begins to feel weak. Suddenly he hurls blood, and Eri reveals that she slipped him some poison with that kiss. But it's not lethal, since she preferred to end him with her own hands. Next, she turns to Kaori and begins to recite her soul-binding spell, but before she can complete it, Nagumo shows up and asks what the f is going on. He teleports to Kaori's side and tosses Hiyama out of the way, then hands Kaori over to Tio and Aiko to work on. But Eri says it's no use since she's already dead, so tries to make a deal with him while a Magic Knight attacks him from behind, but he shoots his head off without turning. Next, she sends Captain Meld after him, but Nagumo stops his sword with just 2 fingers, and when he realizes that Meld is begging him to put them out of their misery, he shoots him down, then whips out a machine gun and takes out the rest of the Magic Knights. When the dust settles, he puts the gun to Eri's head and asks for her last words, but before he can pull the trigger, a fireball comes at him, which he takes out, followed by Hiyama, who tries to attack while screaming at him. But Nagumo slams him into the floor and tells him to shut his bitch ass up. He holds him by his neck, while Hiyama cries and blames him for everything. Then he kicks his whiny ass out into the horde of monsters gathering around the building. Tio tells him they've been able to attach her soul, but need Yue's help to go any further. Then Fredhead shows up and tells him to surrender since they're completely surrounded. But Nagumo calmly summons a device that creates a huge energy blast, which takes out everything outside the walls instantly, then tells him to get out of his sight. Fredhead swears to get revenge for this disgraceful L and leaves with Eri by his side, while Yue and Shia finally arrive, and they follow Tio to try and help Kaori as Nagumo assures Shizuku that they'll definitely bring her back. Some days later, Lily reads a report explaining how Eri used her necromancy skills to control the female demon from the labyrinth and contact the demons to make a deal to access the kingdom in exchange for Amanagawa. Also, the brainwashing and murder of the king were discovered to be the work of the nun, who is currently missing. So Lily visits the tributes to the fallen. At the same time, the girls continue to work on Kaori, and Yue tells Nagumo that Aiko took a break and advises him to go to her, so he finds her. and she confesses that she's sad that any of her students had to die, so he offers her his back to cry on. Later, Amanagawa and Shizuku finish sparring, and when Lily checks in to see how they're doing, he tells her she's been waiting for Nagumo, but he doesn't fully trust him. Suddenly, Nagumo and the rest fall from the sky, and when Shizuku asks where Kaori is, he warns her that she looks a bit different. Then she lands in Noit's body, and Shizuku embraces her. When they ask what happened to her own body, she explains that she wanted to be stronger, so they repaired Noit's body and put her soul inside, while her body is suspended in magic for when she chooses to go back. So Shizuku thanks him for all his help and promises to do whatever it takes to pay him back. Afterward, he tells them the truth about the god of this world, which upsets Amanagawa, who intends to fight the god, but when Nagumo tells him he doesn't intend to fight for people he doesn't know, he tells Amanagawa to become strong and protect them himself. Later, the group has a dinner in the palace, and the students come in to join them and ask where they're heading next. And when he mentions the labyrinth he'd be going to, Lily asks if she can tag along as she'd like to go to the imperial capital to discuss with the emperor. So he says he doesn't mind but has no intention of going to the capital. So Amanagawa suggests he goes along to protect her and asks him to show him how to get ancient magic so he can be stronger. After hearing this, all the students plan to follow along in hopes of getting stronger, so he tells them they leave at dawn, which makes them excited. After the girls offer to feed Nagumo from their spoons, and he decides to indulge them for once, causing Tio to get off from the spoon he used. Then she asks him to reward her for saving Aiko, and tells him to stick his tool in her rear, just like he did the first time they met. This annoys him, so he decides to bring out his longer, harder tool and tells her to brace herself, but she tries to chicken out when she sees how large it is. The next morning, the group waits outside while the students and Lily join up with them, and they bid Aiko, and the hero rejects goodbye. Will Nagumo change his mind and defeat the evil god? Comment Nagumo's tool if you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. See you in the next video.